Before we start, I just wanted to begin by thanking all of you who are tuning in and spending a little bit of your Thursday with us. I know for a lot of people who watch Jeopardy or love Jeopardy, this has been a really, really hard week. And I know it's meant a lot to me to be able to talk about the show and to talk about Alex Trebek with other people who loved Jeopardy and loved him. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to The Ringer, to my publisher, 12 Books, to the great folks at 92Y for hosting us. I'm sorry we can't all be there in person, but I'm glad that moving online means that we can welcome people from all over. A little bit about me. My name is Claire McNear, and I'm a staff writer at The Ringer. I grew up with Jeopardy, as so many people have, and I've been writing a Jeopardy column for a few years. That gradually turned into a book called Answers in the Form of Questions, which was published this Tuesday and is available now wherever you buy your books. My goal was to look at Jeopardy through a few different lenses. One of those was the show, the history of it, the people who actually make it, and what a day looks like on that set in Culver City. And I wanted to look at the contestants. I've had the great honor of getting to know some contestants over the last few years, and I wanted to spotlight their stories, how people train for Jeopardy, what it's like to be on that stage, and how the show has changed the lives of a lot of the people who've been on it, and that might be monetarily or it might not. And of course, I wanted to spotlight Alex Trebek, who is in the midst of his 37th season hosting Jeopardy when he passed away on Sunday. He was in the studio filming new episodes just a week and a half before his death. I had the great privilege of getting to speak with him while I was reporting, and some of our conversations are present in my book. He was an icon, plain and simple, and I think the outpouring of grief over the last few days speaks to how much he meant to the people whose lives he touched, and that's those whose lives he touched in the studio, as well as the millions who've had their lives touched by him just watching from home. I'm joined by three wonderful contestants. We planned this event before Trebek's tragic passing, and it's such a bittersweet time to be thinking about and talking about Jeopardy, but I'm honored to be joined by three people who've all gotten to know him a bit over the years, and I hope we can use this time to remember and celebrate him. If you watch Jeopardy, you are undoubtedly familiar with their faces and their accomplishments on the show, but in case you're not, we've got, and forgive me, I am no Johnny Gilbert. First, Austin Rogers, who won 12 games, more than $400,000 in 2017, was the second runner-up in the 2017 Tournament of Champions, and was a captain in the 2019 All-Star Games. Thank you, Austin.
Thank you, Claire. Pleasure to be here, and pleasure to be second place several times.
We've also got Buzzy Cohen, who won 9 games and $164,000 in 2016, won the 2017 Tournament of Champions, and was also a captain in the 2019 All-Star Games. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Claire. It's great to be a part of this, and it's good to be back with my friends, Austin and Pam.
Great. And finally, we have Pam Mueller, who's had a slew of notable Jeopardy appearances since she first won the college championship back in 2000, including the 2001 Tournament of Champions, the 2005 Ultimate Tournament of Champions, the 2014 Battle of the Decades, and the All-Star Games, in which her team, Team Colby, was second runner-up. Thank you, Pam.
Thanks for having me. I'm so glad to be able to do this with you guys, especially this week. It's always great to be able to talk Jeopardy. So,
well, thank you. I wanted to start tonight, of course, with Alex Trebek. And Austin, I will start with you because you famously, and I know you actually went to Alex Trebek's house, and I will ask about that in a little bit, but you famously had a kind of prickly relationship with him during your initial run on the show. You know, you would swear and he would kind of tell you off. And that, to me, always seemed like he wasn't actually mad so much as he was really kind of playing along very well and happy to play the straight man. So I was wondering if you could talk about that.
I mean, that's America's father, you know, gently chastising you while mom's looking, but then while mom's not looking, he'll be like, "That's okay, just don't ham it up too much." And that persona came across with him for his entire life. I remember one time I was at just some random taping, I don't even remember why, and I was walking out to my car to go somewhere or leave the studio lot, and then I saw Alex walking across the parking lot in his off-duty gear, which is a denim jacket, a black baseball cap, and jeans. And I didn't actually see him. He saw me first. He goes, "Austin, Austin. I look and I'm like, oh, hey, are we at the Mr. Trebek or the Alex point right now? I don't know. Like, hey, you. And he goes, so what do you think? Oh, and that's what it was. It was we were being briefed on the All Stars. He goes, what do you think about this whole All Stars thing? And I go, I think it's going to be really exciting. He goes, I think it's going to be a cluster. Oop. Spoiler
He
alert.
was right. He
It
called
sort
it.
of was. But that was it. On screen, he goes, and every single time he's on the studio, on screen, he goes, ladies and gentlemen, what a great night of Jeopardy. Off screen, he goes, someone get me a Chardonnay.
Buzzy, do you have any favorite memories?
Yeah, I think I would agree with what you said. He really enjoyed being in on the joke, and I think he had a really great sense of humor. One memory that I had was that for Hanukkah, after the Tournament of Champions, my wife made me the wrestling belt that, like of the Jeopardy champion. And I went to a taping. I had a friend in from out of town, and I brought it just to kind of show the crew because we've all gotten to know each other, and I thought it was so fun. And they brought it back to show to Alex, and it was his idea. Like they came back out and they're like, okay, Alex wants to do something, put the belt on, and when he says something about you, stand up and show off the belt. So he came up with this whole kind of goofy thing about introducing me as being so humble and all that stuff. And so he loved an opportunity to kind of joke around. And I think especially with folks like Pam and Austin, and myself and other players who he got to know from multiple appearances, he felt more comfortable doing that. And I think that's part of what became so fun for the audience as well.
Pam, what about you?
Yeah, when Austin brought up his off-duty clothes, that reminded me in the 2001 Tournament of Champions, there was a party on stage afterward, and he came out in a t-shirt and jeans, and I was floored. Never seen this man outside of suit. I was like trying to take surreptitious pictures to show my friends to be like, look, he's wearing jeans. So that was great. I guess a more poignant memory is just that the All-Stars, we put together this book to give him, and then the last taping day of season 35, when we thought he might not be coming back for another season, we gave it to him. Each of us had a page where we got to thank him and share our favorite memories with him, and he seemed to really like that. So
yeah, from having talked to a whole lot of contestants over the course of writing my book, it seems like overwhelmingly the question that people are asked when you tell people that you've been on Jeopardy is, what is Alex Trebek really like? And of course, most contestants don't really know, because quiz shows like Jeopardy are dictated by these really, really strict federal laws because of the 1950s quiz show scandals. So for most players on Jeopardy, they kind of really only see what happens in the episode, him walking out on the stage and the handshake at the end and then goodbye. But obviously you three have all had the chance to spend some time on the set and get to know him a bit. And I'm curious, like, what was there a moment when you felt like you could honestly answer that question of what he's really like? And maybe it was just like seeing him in jeans and a t-shirt. To all of you, but also I guess Austin, you have been to his house, so let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Well, I'd say the moment when that sort of happens is, now there was this one moment, and I won't bring it up who, but I was at a taping of Jeopardy, and Alex asked, and who are you, sitting in the audience? And the person who was there had won 6 games or something like that. And Alex apologized profusely because he just didn't remember. So those 6 games of your Jeopardy life, which is one whole business day, a nap overnight, a stressful nap overnight, and then maybe another morning, those 6 games, which were so pivotal to you, were just one business day for him. So, well, were a day and a morning for him. So you can't fault him for not remembering that. But once you get like Buzzy and Pam and I, and we went through the revolving door again and again and again, there'll be a moment, and it'll be when the microphone's off while you're taking the photos or the promo stills or the stuff like that, where he says just to one of you, or maybe to 2 or 3 of you, like, grins through the teeth, and he says, "I can't wait for this shit to be over," right? That's when you knew you were in, because he would never do that. He would never drop that veil of prestige for who ultimately he knows is going to be a one and done contestant. Us, he's like, you don't want to be here too, do you? Of course, the answer was yes. We always wanted to be there.
I guess related to that, he seemed to really kind of embody the character of the prickly school teacher, and to some degree I think that was a character. He knew that kind of dropping that veil, swearing, talking about drinking, wanting to get out of there was this really surprising moment for contestants. But it also seems like in large part he was sort of who he seemed like on the show, this kind of scholarly, patient, wise figure who really cared about these facts. Pam, since you knew him the longest of anyone here, I mean, does that ring true to you?
Yeah, it does. Although I think, because I was young when I was first on, I feel like our relationship has changed like through the years, from like very much a like avuncular figure, even though he's still Uncle Alex, whatever, to more of a, now I can joke with you, now I don't have to be worried that, I'm like spoiling the mind of a child. But yeah, I think that he knows a lot, just being around those clues all the time. He knows a lot of them, and he always has the right comeback too. So
It seemed like he cared about it. Like he was like kind of personally offended if you didn't know like the fact about Mark Twain. Like
but
what
he
is
was
it?
also really, really surprised and happy when somebody gets a question that he thought was really hard that no one was going to get, and that was the best. He was like, "Wow, you got that! I've never heard of that." And I was like, "Okay, now I feel good."
I think his sort of like upset at you missing something, what to me the energy was that of like, a teacher. He knew how smart everyone had to be to make it onto that stage. And he knew that probably deep down everybody knew most of the material that was up there, and that for reasons of nerves or stress or a million other reasons, people don't perform their best when they're up on that stage. And I'm sure everyone who knows someone who's been on the show, it's like, oh, the question they missed or whatever. I have a ton of those. But I think that his sort of like teasing was in the way of like the teacher who's like, come on, you knew that. Like, how'd you miss that question? It was more about that than like upset that you didn't know something. That was always kind of how it felt to me, at least.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of my favorite discoveries in reporting and talking to so many contestants, was that, in the closing moments of every episode, he walks over to shake the hand of the champion, and you can't hear what he's saying to these contestants. But I heard from a lot of contestants that in fact he was like breaking down what had just happened in Final Jeopardy, and it was either a mix of like, how did you know that? Or, like, wow, well, you might have missed this news item, but here's why you should have known. So I guess he was such a pop culture figure as well. And I was asked this week what my favorite Alex Trebek cameo was. And there are so many. So I guess I wanted to ask you guys, and Austin, let's start with you.
Favorite cameo. I'm not, I got to be honest, I'm not really well versed on most of them. I mean, I remember obviously the Cheers is the iconic one that set the benchmark, and that was Jeopardy. Jeopardy was the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire of like 1983 and 84 and 85. It was a juggernaut. The whole country was like, because you had both the baby boomers who remember the original Jeopardy and they're like, hey, it's back again. And then you had like people like me who were young kids. It was the mandatory viewing. So rather than a cameo, I'd like to talk about like the cultural fabric he is. And this is literally what happened to me Tuesday night. I still work at my bar, and with our outdoor seating for COVID safety, we have now Bluetooth speakers outside. So I've got a playlist going. It's 80s, it's jazz, it's stuff like that. Well, someone texted me a supercut of Alex Trebek swearing, and it's been making the rounds the past couple of days, and it's him doing infomercials or the short-lived Jeopardy TV game and stuff like that. And in between all the takes, he's like, like some stupid son of a bitch is going to call this up. Well, anyway, someone sends me a link of it, and without thinking that I'm still hooked up to the Bluetooth outside, I click the link. And now Alex Trebek is broadcast across 48th Street. And this woman, just a woman going about her day, I think she was a delivery woman because she was asking for an address. At that moment, she stops and she just looks up and she goes, "Oh man, Alex Trebek, that guy, that guy. Anyway, can you tell me which one's 402?" And I'm like, oh, there was no visual to this. There was no visual whatsoever. The video clip was on my phone. The Bluetooth was the only thing broadcasting into the middle of a crowded Manhattan street. And this woman, apropos of nothing, just walking by goes, Alex Trebek, man, he was the best. Which way's 402? And that punched me because that was just 2 days later, and at the exact bar where I found the news. So there will be a little special little circle of life Hakuna Matata moment there that I'll always appreciate.
I have a much shorter answer.
Yeah.
Go on.
It's obviously the X-Files. I was an X-File growing up, and so seeing two of my interests merge on one show was amazing. So that's my favorite cameo.
Can you talk about that cameo, because it's so weird?
Well, the whole episode is so weird. But yeah, he and Jesse Ventura show up, and they're men in black, and they're telling, the characters all these sort of conspiratorial things. I remember Jesse Ventura saying, no object has been mistaken for a UFO more often than the planet Venus, like trying to say that, there's no UFOs. Anyway, and they also deny vociferously that they are Alex Trebek and Jesse Ventura. So like he is Alex and he's not Alex. Yeah.
My favorite is it's not really a cameo, but the Jeopardy episode in Groundhog Day. And the reason is I think that really embodies everybody's fantasy, right? That like you're watching Jeopardy and you have gotten all the answers already. I think every contestant has that fantasy. And I think everybody watching at home as well kind of loves when they know it. And wouldn't it be great if somehow this was the stuff that I just heard yesterday? So to me, that appearance in that movie, I love that one. Lake Titicaca.
It's so funny you should say that, because our childhood routine, Channel 8 was in Connecticut, Channel 7 was WABC in New York, and they aired Jeopardy at 2 separate times. So my brothers and I would watch the Channel 8 episode a half hour early and then watch with the whole family on Channel 7 a half hour later and pretend we were utter geniuses. My parents would play along and be like, "How do you guys know all of this?" Of course they knew we were watching the Channel 8 podcast a half hour early, but they played along with it. And that's what he did. That wasn't the contestants. We could give two craps about the contestants. We cared about him presenting the questions and everyone sitting down, dinner stops, boom. That's it. It's Jeopardy time.
Yeah. I love the one that was on Seinfeld, and Trebek I think doesn't even actually appear on screen, but the premise of the episode is that George Costanza has gone celibate and suddenly is very, very, very smart,
right?
And he knows all the answers to whatever the night of Jeopardy is, and my favorite aspect of that is that it wasn't a real Jeopardy episode. They had Trebek record some fake clues just to fit into this. So I've like forever wondered how much he had it like that explained to him. Like, what did he know specifically what that would be used for?
Well, it's funny because there's like a community of former contestants, and sometimes when an episode is playing in the back of another movie or a show, people will try to figure out whose episode it was and kind of shout them out. So like whoever, was on that episode that they used in Groundhog Day or, all these other appearances, they kind of like, they get to live beyond just their one appearance in a really fun way.
Totally. I will return to that community of former contestants in just a bit, but I wanted to ask broadly how the three of you got to Jeopardy. And from talking to a lot of contestants, a lot of them grew up kind of Jeopardy nuts, were trivia nuts, loved it, and maybe, you know, we're in Quiz Bowl or competed in geographic bees, whatever. So I guess Pam, starting with you, because I think you had kind of an unusual path to Jeopardy, I guess, in that it was not really this, but like, were you a Jeopardy diehard person growing up? What was it like your lifelong goal to go on this? Obviously, you were
No,
very young.
yeah, it wasn't my lifelong goal. I did remember my parents playing Trivial Pursuit when I was really little, and I was kind of enamored of the pieces of pie, but I don't think I really understood what it was. And then, you know, eventually later I got like a kids edition of Trivial Pursuit and, you know, kind of had fun with that. And it wasn't really until high school when people were like, you know, you're pretty good at this. You should maybe go on Jeopardy, because it's on at an ungodly, you know, 3:30 p.m. hour in Chicago. So it's like right prime after school time. So, you know, we'd watch it sometimes in the senior lounge in high school. So yeah, everyone said I'd be good at it. And I was like, okay, you know, maybe they're right. And back in the day, you had to send in a postcard to get an audition. So I sent in a postcard. I wish I remembered like what kind of postcard it was. I'm sure I put thought into that, but I don't remember. And then they called saying there's audition in St. Louis. You want to come? Yes, I want to come. My mom and I drove down there, did the audition. You know, you take a test in person, and then the people who pass it play a mock game. And whatever I did in the mock game must have been really good, because one of the other people who was at the audition was like, well, I guess we'll be seeing you on television. But I don't really know. I don't remember. So I can't give anyone any advice about that. But, you know, that guy, Sour Grapes, was right. A FedEx showed up at my door, and then I taped the college tournament. And I never thought, you know, I'd go beyond that. I thought I was going to lose to the Harvard kid, which I did, but I got a wild card, and then I beat the Harvard kid. So.
Buzzy and Austin, were you guys like Jeopardy obsessives growing up? Was it like a ritual in your family?
Yeah, I certainly was. I watched it every night, and I think some of my family are tuned in to this, and they can nod along and say yes, we had to watch every night. And I was so like kind of tuned into the tempo of the show that I would be able to flip to another, like Fox had Simpsons reruns on at the same time as Jeopardy, and I could flip to Fox during the commercial break and flip back, and it would be right when like the show was coming back, because I really like, I watched it so much that I could like internalize the length of the commercial breaks. And I did Quiz Bowl in high school, but as you can imagine, knowing me now and from Jeopardy, like I did it in a pretty irreverent way. Like there are very serious quiz bowlers, like Matt Jackson, who was on the show, is a very serious quiz bowler. And that wasn't me. Like I was there to have fun, and like I did okay. When I got to college, Quiz Bowl was all serious quiz bowlers. I didn't do that. I never did pub quizzes. I think I went to one once in Aspen, Colorado when I was 19, and my friend and I used a fake ID to get into a bar to do a pub quiz. That's how cool we were. And we came in second. So I never won a pub quiz. And then when I and I didn't have TV. That was the other thing. Like in college and after college, I didn't have cable, so I wasn't really watching live TV. You know, I'd watch movies or stream stuff. But then, in order to watch the Academy Awards one year, I needed to get bunny ears, and so all of a sudden, I started getting over-air television, and I started watching Jeopardy again, which I had, you know, always loved and would always watch when I could, but it wasn't like obviously part of my life, and I was enjoying it as much as I did. And there was like a promo that said, hey, take the test and see if you could become a contestant. And so I just signed up. And similarly to Pam, like a couple months later, after doing the online test, I had another in-person test that I took and a mock game. And then a few months after that, I went in and I was actually an alternate first for a tape day because I live in Southern California. And then I taped my shows about a month after I had been an alternate. So it was kind of slow, but in the grand scheme of Jeopardy and people who it takes years and years of taking the test and stuff like that, it was pretty fast. But yeah, I mean, I always loved trivia. I used to read the encyclopedia. I loved biographies. I love that stuff. I still do.
Austin, what about you? Was it like a lifelong goal for you to go on Jeopardy?
No. Actually, my trajectory in Buzzies was pretty similar. During it was called Texaco Star Challenge in Westchester County. That was our quiz bowl. The second they would say a math question, I'd start twirling my pencil. And but the second it was like, if it was like in 1815, I'd go boom, and I go Waterloo, and they go in 1815 at the Battle of Waterloo, and I'd be like, okay, nah, I thought I had it. So I had it in my mind because I got it right, but I didn't get it right. And then in college, that was the height of millionaire Regis craziness. And you had to do the fastest fingers on the telephone. And I got that. You had to do 4 of them correct. And then you had to call back again and do 10 of them correct. Then you were entered in a random computerized lottery. I did that correctly, something on the order of 5 times. And then when John Carpenter won his first $1 million, I'm like, I could have done that. Why? And then I forgot about it. I forgot about watching Jeopardy because, like Buzzy, I didn't have a TV anymore. I didn't have a TV for like 10 years. And then I answered a random Craigslist ad, and it got me on Cash Cab. And at that point in time, I won Cash Cab's biggest prize ever. I doubled down. I got $2,400. Woo! And then a friend of mine who was opening a bar, he goes, I know people do pub quiz. Let's go. And we hopped around bar to bar to bar in the city and sort of mocked each of their best components and created this pub quiz sort of monstrosity that I started hosting at multiple bars, multiple nights of the week, meanwhile holding down daily corporate jobs as event planners or in advertising agencies and stuff like that. And then similar to Buzzy, I saw the online test, I took it, I got an audition, thought I nailed it, except I maybe didn't nail the last question, because the last question the producers ask is, when you win Jeopardy, what are you going to do with the money? And I'm like, I don't know, open a bar, run it into the ground, letting all my friends drink for free. Got a lot of laughs, not Jeopardy material. And then I didn't get it. And I completely forgot about it. And then every year or so, or a year and a half, I'd take the online test, forget about it, take the online test, forget about it. And then once I took the online test, forgot about it, got the phone call, and then, holy crap, I'm here again. I got another audition, and this time I say I'm going to drive around the world in a Mercedes, and then you forget about it again, and then you get the call. And that was about, I want to say something on the order of 9 years between the first audition and the one that got me on the show. So that was the entirety of like probably my 30s, I guess, or my late 20s into my late 30s. But in the accumulation of that time, I had hosted 9,842 different individual pub quizzes in which I wrote 71,482 individual questions. And you would write a question and it would come up on Jeopardy like clockwork. I'd see a category, I'd be like, they're going to do one like this. How do you know? I wrote it already. And
that's incredible. I've got to stop you really quickly because I think we've got a couple visitors who've stopped by. Is that right? Are you guys unmuted?
Hi. Hello.
Ah, James Holzhauer, Brad Rudder. Hello, how are you?
Very good. We're joining you from the set of the major motion picture, The Austin Rogers Story. I am playing Austin and James is playing Buzzy.
Well, you guys are hard at work on the chase right now, right?
Yes, that's true.
How's that
argue
going?
the hard work part.
Actually, yeah, that's true.
Going?
I've been sitting around all day doing nothing but watching the Masters and surfing Twitter. So that's just a little glimpse behind how the TV sausage is made.
That's great. I see that you guys are going to be quite dressed up on the show. I'm very excited about that.
Well, it's a prime time event.
It's in January, right?
We're actually here to workshop these outfits. Are they getting good reviews?
I think so. Comment section's coming to life.
Yes, breaking news, January 7th, 9 p.m.
Wonderful. While we have you, could you just, I guess, both of you, I'm so curious about what you think Alex Trebek's legacy is. We've dedicated this event to him, and we talked a lot about him at the beginning, but what would you consider to be his legacy on Jeopardy?
I think it's incredible that he is, one public figure who's totally scandal-free in a time where it seems like everyone else is getting dirty laundry aired out in public. You know, you think of Alex, you never think of anything bad. You think about some charitable giving. You think about how he feels like everyone's uncle, everyone's grandpa up on the stage. He's someone you can always trust to have the answers to everything. And, you know, just always positivity through the face of strong adversity is, I think, how he'll be remembered.
Brad, what
Yeah,
about you?
I think James is right about the courage involved in his fight against cancer. I think he's also kind of the last of a breed as well, in which, you know, you could come up as a broadcaster, you know, starting on the radio on the CBC, and then just gradually taking the next step up from that and to game show host in the 70s, and then an institution with Jeopardy from the 80s and continuing on. And yeah, it's I don't think anybody will ever be the kind of Americana icon that he is ever again. With, you know, the audience is so fragmented now. Jeopardy is one of the few shows that everybody recognizes and everybody watches. I'll always hear of new shows that I've never heard of, and I end up watching them, and they're great. But everybody knows Jeopardy. It's one of the few that's still true for.
Yeah, and quickly, to those of you who don't know, though, I can't imagine there are very many of you here. This is Brad Rutter, the winningest Jeopardy contestant ever, and James Holzhauer, who of course had that incredible 32-game winning streak last year.
Multiple time contestant, according to the back of your book.
Hey, listen, I've already been getting crap from people. I told you they would be complaining. Let's have it on the record that
just forward
James
the hate
wrote
mail
that
to
description.
me.
Okay, great. Well, so I've noticed you guys are in separate rooms. A lot of people viewed your sparring during the Greatest of All Time tournament as the sign of some kind of underlying enmity. So I'm wondering.
Yeah, that was in my rider,
friends?
actually. James is not allowed to be in my presence. He's not allowed to look me in the eye.
I actually started the pandemic just so Brad couldn't get too close to me.
No, that stuff is all jokes.
Great. So are we going to see a GOAT rematch? And I know we only have you guys very briefly, but will there be a GOAT rematch someday?
Well, Ken is now ineligible. So no, is the short answer.
Messed up. That's messed up. I guess it seems like things are happening over there, but I just any final thoughts on the magic of Alex Trebek? You know, will Jeopardy kind of always be the Alex Trebek show? Obviously, he, you know, was always saying that he wanted Jeopardy to go on after him. But you know, what was you talked a bit about the secret sauce, but you know, what was the kind of underlying magic of it?
Well, you've probably mentioned this already, since I'm just dropping in, but just his kind of avuncular presence on the landscape. And Jeopardy is all about family. And people always tell me, you know, I watch Jeopardy with my grandma or my parents or my niece and nephew or whatever it might be. And Alex is kind of that, you know, he's kind of America's uncle, where he's in the house all the time, and he's sort of a trusted elder figure. And yeah, and I think a lot of the contestants feel the same way. Like people always ask me what I'm up to, and I always joke, it's like, yeah, I'm still living off Uncle Alex's money. So yeah, I think that's how he'll be remembered across a lot of different areas.
James, what about you? Just the magic of Alex Trebek.
Yeah, I mean, have you ever talked to someone who met Alex Trebek and their reaction wasn't like, oh, this is one of the 10 greatest moments of my life? You know, everyone dreamed of being up there. Really, he lived up to the hype, I would say. You know, everyone. He makes time for you up on stage. You know, you got to keep your distance because of the regulations of the quiz shows, but he still made time to chat with you, really get a sense of who you were. I don't know. I kind of felt like I had a really special relationship with him, especially he got his diagnosis in the middle of my taping my episodes. And, you know, I like to think I brightened his day a little bit when I was there, whatever I could do for him.
Yeah, I mean, for you having won 32 games, you've got the second longest streak ever in Jeopardy history. What was it like coming back to the studio day in and day out? Like,
I gradually learned how cold it was and dressed more appropriately for it. This is a warning out there to any prospective contestants, especially if you're female. I see females coming in like, you know, a nice sundress or something. Don't do it. You know, bring a sweater, be comfortable out there. Other than that, you know, it got increasingly awkward meeting the new contestants and having to tell them, oh, by the way, I've won $2 million on the show. But I don't know. I kind of felt like I was part of the family there, and I like to think they give this treatment to all the contestants. But the production team is great. You know, a couple of the executive producers who worked with me are gone now. I don't know. There's been a lot of change, but I like to think that they're recruiting the right kind of people to really give you that atmosphere where all the contestants feel like this is a wonderful day. You know, win or lose, I'm never going to forget this.
Yeah. The other thing, you know, kind of going off what these guys said, I think you always felt like, not, you know, in addition to the entire crew really trying to make it a great day for you, you always felt like Alex was rooting for you. Like whoever you were, like he was always on your side. He wanted you to get it. And as opposed to like there are other game show hosts like Monty Hall, like wanted you to get the goat. You know, he was kind of trying to trick you in a way. Like he was sort of playing with you. Alex was never trying to trick you. He wanted you to get it. And I think that's part of why people at home connected with him, because like as the fourth contestant playing from home, he wanted you to get it too. And I think that is part of what kind of made him such a purely endearing kind of person. He was rooting for you. It was all positivity, you know, even when he was teasing you.
Absolutely. Well, I guess, and you guys feel, I know you have to hop off at some point, so if you've got to go, I totally understand. But just to everybody, what advice do you give to aspiring contestants? I'm sure all of you are asked all the time, how do I get on Jeopardy? And specifically, how do I win on Jeopardy? And since you've all done quite a lot of it, what is the recipe to that, if there is a recipe at all?
Watch the show every night. That's the best thing, because Jeopardy is, I mean, it's a trivia show, obviously, but it's also kind of a wordplay show where every clue is able to be deciphered if you don't have the requisite knowledge for it, or maybe not everyone, but 90% of them. So there will be a little joke in there, or just a little hint about something. This colorful river, in China, something like that. You really get a feel for how the writers write. And there really is kind of a canon too. I mean, it's not exactly a finite canon of knowledge that you have to learn, but you will figure out what it's more important to know than others, such as, presidents is important to know, world capitals is important to know, geography is more important than opera, that kind of thing. And sadly, one that is no longer operative, but was actually quite useful, was just getting a feel for the cadence of Alex's voice. Because if you're going to time the buzzer, that's the best way to do it. And you'll be able to time when he's going to be finished that way.
Yeah, I would say the biggest difference between getting on Jeopardy and winning on Jeopardy is buzzer skills.
And yeah I think that
body of work.
How to win.
Let James go. He's more successful. No, James is more successful than I am, so he's got better advice than I do.
I would say that the questions of how to get on versus how to succeed on the show are kind of two separate things. Your audition, you have to be lucky enough to get an audition in the first place. For those of you who don't know, you take an online test, and as best we can tell, they kind of have a random drawing from the people who pass the test to who gets to an in-person audition, or I guess it's a Zoom audition now. But, at that audition, be the kind of person who they don't want to have to work really hard with you on the show. Read clearly, follow directions well, have a cheerful attitude, don't look like you're flustered very easily. And, they'll think, okay, this is someone we can easily work with and have a smooth production with. So, yeah, that would be what I say. Passing that audition is really the most important part.
How about the buzzer? I mean, you guys have all mentioned, obviously it is such a huge part of the game, and if you don't have the buzzer timing right, you can't get in, even if you know the whole board. So I guess I'm curious how you approached preparing for the buzzer, and if there's a way to practice that beyond just obviously timing with Alex Trebek, who
aesthetic thumb exerciser, because I wasn't well versed in the Moneyball sabermetrics of the Jeopardy underground, but these guys will be able to talk on how there's a whole cottage industry of simulated buzzers. I mean, you touch upon it in your book, where people actually travel to different places to work on these alpha simulated buzzers. But like Brad said, the walking around, I just walked around with the calisthenic thumb exerciser in my hand while listening to old episodes of Jeopardy. just rhythm, rhythm, rhythm. So I was sort of like loosey goosey rather than the hard science that's being implemented.
So I guess I'm probably more in the hard science world. I did get like a USB buzzer and connected it to an app where someone reads clues and then you buzz in, and it works like Jeopardy where you get locked out and you can see how early you were. You can see when you come in afterwards how late you were, and you can track. I spent a lot of time tracking my performance. I tracked myself at different times of day. And then I would do things where I would create different delays on the buzzer activation. And essentially what I was trying to do, I talk about this, this is about Claire's book, but I put out an audiobook a few months ago and I talk a little bit about this stuff. What I did was, what happens is you get on stage and sometimes you're a little more jittery or you're a little tired after lunch or something like that. Like these kinds of things happen. I'm sure we've all experienced that. Like takes maybe a few clues to get your buzzer mojo. And so by changing like the delay time and when I could buzz in, I was basically recreating like how quickly can I get back into the rhythm, like changing what the rhythm is and then how quickly can I get back into it. So yeah, coffee certainly helps.
Seems like we might be saying goodbye to Brad and James imminently.
Yeah.
But okay, maybe that hasn't quite happened yet. Well, I guess we're gonna move to audience questions now. So I'm looking at, there've been a whole bunch of questions coming in. Talk about like the pressure of actually being on the stage, and is there a way to prepare for just the weirdness of suddenly being on camera under the lights?
There's a certain amount of X factor in there, and not to disparage, a librarian from Topeka, but if you were, the class clown, or you were maybe a failed stand-up comedian, or you worked in service industry, or you were on a sports team or something like that, that little X factor of the intimidation of there's Alex, there's the Klieg lights, it's really cold, people are touching me and putting microphones, there's makeup on me, I can see why people will freeze up. And to James's point earlier, if you're not that kind of gregarious sort of I'm with it, I'm game for anything person in the audition, you might not get selected in the first place. So in a way, it sort of weeds itself out, but there's nothing to prepare you for walking on that stage. It's got to smell, it's got to feel, it's got to taste, and it hits you. No matter how jaded you are from prior life experiences, you're still like, oh, this is for real. So it could shake you up.
Yeah, I did a lot of musical theater, so I may be afraid of a lot of things, but not public speaking or being on stage. So while I might not be the class clown or as gregarious, it was never sort of a nerves issue of being under the lights on camera.
Yeah, and Alex has said that the people who do well in Jeopardy, he's noticed, tend to be like teachers and lawyers, and there are these people that have to, be kind of think on their toes in front of, other people and really perform well. And again, like this is kind of what the whole audiobook I did was about. But one of the things that I think can really help is like trying to recreate the experience of the show, which is very different from the experience of watching the show. So doing it standing up in the clothes or shoes at the very least that you're going to be on the show in, so that you're like used to physically doing it at the time of day, because that's also usually pretty jarring for people. So I would say like, there's a lot of information out there about what the experience of Jeopardy is like, both from, former contestants talking about it and all that stuff. Try to learn from that. And when you're studying or getting ready to be on the show, really do your best to recreate what you're going to actually be doing.
Let's talk about studying for just a minute. James, while we still have you, you had obviously an interesting way of studying for the show. Could you talk a little bit about that? Excuse me. Oh, he might be muted. Oh, no. Well, we seem to have lost the audio there, but I think you used children's books. You can nod. Yeah, it was children's books. I guess the rest of you who still have audio currently, can you talk about how you studied and did you prepare before you got the call? Usually people get the call to come on Jeopardy about 4 weeks before they actually go into tape. were you preparing before that, or what did you do in that 4-week period?
Back, baby.
Yeah,
If you really want to do your best on the show, you have to start preparing before that. I got about 3 weeks, which I think is fairly typical, and that's not enough time to get from nothing to Jeopardy level, you know. So it's up to you to determine how hard you want to go at it. I think the children's book strategy is great, by the way. It's Brad Rutter approved. I don't know if he's microphone.
Yes, absolutely. That is genius. And like when James first talked about that, I was like, oh my God, why didn't I think of that?
well, you might have a similar experience to me in preparing very different ways through the years, because there wasn't a J archive back in the day. There were, you know, a certain number of books, like on the tip of your tongue was like a holy grail of like information in small chunks that was Jeopardy style, or, you know, the Chuck Forrest book or the Mike Dupay book. But really, you know, there was no central repository, so everyone was kind of preparing in their own way, you know, finding the categories they thought were important to study and studying them, world capitals, etc.
I pulled out my 30-year-old Barron's Students Concise Encyclopedia. That's this red tome about that big that has slivers of sections on physics and chemistry and politics and geography, and I just read that. And then the other thing I did is I made it fun. I don't really want to reread Pride and Prejudice, but there's a movie of it, so I'm going to watch it. So a lot of documentaries, a lot of movies of the sort of canonical novels, and then there's that Slumdog Millionaire factor. Just your life experiences. If you consume and you're naturally curious, it will pay off, because there will be one in the bottom right corner that just came to you because you read that one article once.
You know, on The Chase, you're going to see the chaser has to explain how they arrived at an answer, and it is going to amaze people how often my answer is, I saw it on The Simpsons.
Yeah, I also kind of had an evolving preparation method. I was a watch the show with a clicker the first time person. And then after my 2 days of taping, I realized like how wholly unprepared that made me for the show. And so I started like making decks of flashcards and stuff like that based on, again, the categories that come up again. But I would study them while I was like working out at the gym to try to recreate the stress of being on the show, like having to come up with it, like hanging from a chin-up bar. And then the other thing that like Alex Jacob introduced me to via, I think, Roger Craig is, you know, well, Alex Jacob has this really amazing like method. He was on my team for All Stars, and basically what he does is he'll like watch a bunch of shows or go through a bunch of things on J Archive, and when he misses something, he like adds it to a list, and then he makes his flashcards out of that, assuming it's the kind of thing that comes up a lot and wasn't just sort of like a pop culture current events kind of clue. So it's like, oh, I didn't know whatever I didn't know who this person was. I'm going to make that a flashcard. So as opposed to just, you know, making a list of Nobel Prize winners, who are the Nobel Prize winners that Jeopardy has asked about, you know, 2 or 3 times before that I didn't know. That's a good way to study.
For those of you who don't know, J Archive is this kind of it's I think a lot of Jeopardy fans do know what it is, but it is this kind of central repository, entirely fan maintained, fan created, of all Jeopardy clues, where this kind of team of archivists who just love Jeopardy, love doing this, basically manually input every single new game of Jeopardy. And I believe there are now more than 400,000 clues. So it's something, they don't have every single game of the Trebek era, but they have pretty close to it. So it is a thing that a lot of contestants turn to now to study with.
And apparently the writers do as well. We found out that the writers sometimes will look on J Archive for stuff. They have their own archive of clues, but I think
amazing. And I was able to talk to a lot of the archivists in the book and interview them about kind of that crazy process, and of course to many contestants who have used that. I wanted to talk about Jeopardy the show. This was one of the central questions that I wanted to answer in my book, which is just, why has Jeopardy endured as just a super, super popular game show? It's something like 10 million people watch it on a normal night. James and Brad, when you were on the Greatest of All Time tournament, the ratings for that were absolutely bonkers. And it for a game show that is now in its 37th season of its current iteration, you know, it's a staged trivia show. It doesn't necessarily make sense that this would be one of the biggest TV shows, period. So I'm curious what you all think about that.
Unfortunately, my answer is about 80% Alex, and I think maybe we're going to see in the upcoming months whether that is true. But you know, it's a good format, but I really think it needs a good host who everyone has grown to love. And you know, hopefully, whoever is there next can engender that same sort of reaction. I think I have to go. Bye.
All right, thank you so much for joining us.
I think, thanks, James. For me, I think it's partially the volume and the variety of clues. Like if you look at other game shows, a lot of times they're trying to milk the drama of a question. And if it's a question that's a subject that you don't know or you're not interested in, you could be sitting there for 5 or 10 minutes waiting for them to get to the next thing that you know.
Sure.
Bye, Brad. No? So whereas Jeopardy, it's like if there's a clue on like crustaceans and you have no idea, or a category rather, there's going to be, 12 other categories that might have something that you like. So there's kind of something for everyone. And whereas I think other game shows don't have the speed and the variety that Jeopardy has. And that's part of what keeps people engaged and brings people back. It's like, is there going to be that category on that thing that I absolutely love that I'm going to feel smarter than the contestants?
Not to jam in the title of my book too forcefully, but to what extent do you think it is the kind of central gimmick of Jeopardy, the answering in a form of a question? How important is the what is, who is?
I mean, I think it's become important. It's become shorthand for like trivia. You know, people, on Win Ben Stein's Money, people would answer as if they were on Jeopardy and get the dunce cap. And, people do it in everyday life when they want to make sort of a trivia point, like, I'll take whatever for 500. What is this? Anyway, but I don't know if that hadn't been the gimmick from the beginning, I'm not sure that things would have played out differently, but I don't know. What do you think, people?
I think that it's made as much certainly it makes it very easily recognizable and, like you say, kind of part of the culture in a very immediately recognizable way. I think it also shaped the phrasing of the clues in a very particular way because you're phrasing them as clues and not questions in a different way. And I think that's as recognizable as the kind of what is thing, like this blah 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 blah, or that blah 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 blah. It's like, to me, the clue phrasing is very idiomatic, and I think all of it just makes it singular as opposed to another question answer format.
Well, you're also learning in the process of the clues, because it'll be like this world capital, and you'd be like, oh, so that's also, is the answer Dodoma? Oh, that's also the biggest producer of oranges on earth. Who knew? I learned 2 things on that. And I love that phrasing of the questions, because it adds this other layer of complexity rather than just the rote millionaire. What's the capital of, why do I keep going into that voice? I'm so sorry about that voice.
So I think we may have lost Brad, but we've got just a few more minutes. And I wanted to ask about life after Jeopardy, and specifically about the kind of alumni community, which I think surprises a lot of people. Certainly, there was one of the great joys for me in writing the book was getting to kind of explore that a little bit and spend some time with you guys. And Buzzy and Pam, you are regulars at O'Brien's in Santa Monica, and I was fortunate enough to go there with you in the book and write about it. And I was absolutely god awful, but you guys are very good and very generous. And I was just hoping you could tell me a little bit about that scene and O'Brien specifically, but the alumni scene generally.
Just before, I did beat Brad at O'Brien's once. So you're welcome. Continue.
Do you want to go, Buzzy? Since
sure.
I'm a newer comer, and then
I'm a newer comer. I actually got invited by Pam and Jerome Vered, who is a great former contestant and former holder of the 5-day winning, when there was a 5-day limit. I think Pam, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he had the 5-day.
Yeah, I think he did for many years.
Yeah, many years. So so Pam and Jerome were at the taping of our Tournament of Champions that Austin and I were in together, and they were like, okay, now you have to come to O'Brien's. And like I said, I wasn't really a pub quiz person, but I really enjoyed it. I've gotten to know a ton of other former contestants through it. I've gotten to know people like Pam better. Alan is a regular as well, who was the third amigo with me and Austin in that TOC. And yeah, people like Cliff Gallagher, Brad is a regular as well. It's fun to have that shared experience because you kind of get to talk around Jeopardy and trivia without having to kind of go through some of the shoe leather of, like you say, like everyone's asking about what's Trebek like. Do they give you the answers beforehand? Like all these questions that everyone always asks about being on Jeopardy that I don't know, like if everybody gets a script for asking former contestants. But I love talking about the show, and don't get me wrong, like I know I'm kind of joking, but it is fun to kind of have, it's such a unique experience that it's nice to have a community that knows that experience and can, you know, kind of reference it or move forward with it or whatever it is. Yeah. And O'Brien's is just absolutely fabulous. I haven't been as regular with the pandemic, not having in person.
It's moved online.
It's moved online and it's moved a little earlier, which is hard for me with kids, but it is still a great community and a great quiz. And when Austin's in town, we go together and we lose. And when Claire's in town, we go together and we win. So that's O'Brien's.
Really quickly, I got a live correction from a very careful listener that in fact Jerome had the 1-day record, not the 5-day record.
Oh,
so
thank
he had
you.
the highest 1-day total. But
yeah, I think Frank had the 5-day.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, that's right. Frank Spangenberg, the wonderful NYPD cop. But anyway, we're out of time. So I wanted to thank everybody for coming and listening to this. I hope you learned something. You can find the link to buy my book if you're interested in any part of this on the 92Y page, and I think in this chat. And I, of course, wanted to thank our wonderful, wonderful panelists, Pam, Buzzy, Austin, and the departed James and Brad. Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you to the 92Y for having us.